Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for Talking Shop. Today we're talking to Lisa Chamblee about playing the best role and maximizing your business potential in the entertainment industry. Hey Lisa, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Everything's good. Thanks for chatting today. So tell us about yourself.
Well, right now I'm currently a studio manager and also I'm a studio designer. And I'm someone in the music industry that I've done many things in my 11 years in the industry. Started off in production and engineering. So studios have been my life for the last 11 years. And I've played different roles in the studio and made money at different roles: Pro Tools operator, assistant, producer, engineer, now studio manager, and now I build studios. So I've kind of have an all-around view of the industry. I really like helping independents, just kind of talk about their situation, see their situation in another light, and hopefully they'll be better after it. So I really like to talk to people, and that's the best resource anyway, to talk to people in the industry and for myself as well. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you today.
Very cool. Appreciate it. So did you go the school route or some other route into the entertainment industry?
Well, when I was growing up, I always loved music, but I didn't see myself as an artist. And I think what's interesting is that I wasn't really drawn to, I danced and I did things on stage and or theater, so I was aware of certain things, but I didn't necessarily gravitate towards the front of house board or things like that, and I don't think that women are encouraged that way, and so I didn't necessarily see the other roles in music coming up. So I went through undergraduate. I went through 2 years of undergraduate before I realized I started hanging out in studios, and I was like, wow, I saw all these different roles that people played it to make music, and I saw a place for myself, but I also knew that for what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to produce or manage or kind of see. I'm a big picture kind of person, and so I knew that I needed to go to school so that I would know what I'm talking about and people would take me seriously. So yeah, I went to school in Minneapolis, the Institute of Production and Recording.
I've always been into music also, and what happened to me was I just realized that the music I was just making and playing back to myself wasn't sounding like real records. So I was like, okay, I've got to figure out some way to actually make that stuff better. So that's how I got involved. So you said studio design. What does that entail?
So I have a partner in the studio design business, and I'm the interiors, and also I help with the flow of, from the very beginning, we talk to what the client needs. So there's all sorts of different clients, what they need in their creative spaces. Some people will be in a home situation and they can build in their garage, or in the pool house or something. And then there's some clients where they're renting out commercial space. So sometimes there's limitations. Sometimes we can kind of build, semi-build, with the intention of we'll have to knock it down, or they'll have to knock it down if they leave, when they leave. And some situations where they'll own the building and we can build from scratch. And studio design, the best situations and what I think any studio designer wants to get into is when we can build from scratch, because then we can have a little bit more of a guarantee to say it's pretty much soundproofed. It's very hard to say soundproofed. We like to say sound isolated. So the better chances that we have at soundproofing and making sure the room sounds great is ideal. But there's all sorts of different situations, so we really just help clients figure out their creative spaces. Sometimes they've kind of done some things on their own, but they know it still doesn't sound right, and so we'll go in and sometimes just treatments on the wall on the correct materials and correct placement is what they're lacking in their space. And then if they when they hire us as a team, they get me, the designer. I come in and, you know, get some fabrics that they've never seen. They'll never, you know, they don't know where to get that, or, you know, or just put different things in the space, lighting. You know, you'd never imagine how much lighting and colors and textures changes things until you've got like a beautifully designed space, versus a space that you just threw a bunch of stuff into and, you know, it's uncomfortable, or, you know, just everything. So we just we come in and we make sure the vibe is right.
Very cool. So when you build this studio for somebody, now they have this thing they didn't have before. How would they go about getting clients? How would they get people to come to this place now that it looks so great?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the client, and for every single person, it's going to depend on what they want, what's their version of success. You know, if we're building something in a home studio, they might not want a lot of traffic there, so their approach on things is going to be different from a studio like Oasis Mastering. It's on Burbank Boulevard. We get walk-up traffic. Like, hey, you know, I'm in the neighborhood. I have a studio down the street because it's like Studio Row. So we would have kind of a different approach than someone that's at home, a composer or whomever. So if, you know, a lot of times our clients are already pretty successful to be able to afford us. But someone that is kind of in the studio business or has a way, I think, you know, if you have gear, you're in the studio business pretty much. So it's really based on relationships. It's always based on relationships.
I try to tell people how their internet or their online presence is very important as far as either getting business or not repelling business.
Right. And you know what's really interesting is because I'm glad you said that, because when I think about how do people expand on their clientele and how do they become successful on that, and it's really the in-person communications with clients that you're going to have. So your internet persona and presence is like baseline. You have to have that. It's how you are in person, the analog version of you, that you have to make sure is on point. So, you know, you're not gonna, you will get web traffic. Okay, you will get web traffic. You can get, you know, you can get likes. You can get people interested. But the moment they need to contact you to actually work with you, if you blow that, you're done.
Yeah.
So, you know, at Oasis we can we don't really advertise, but we can. There's lots of word of mouth. Like today, there was a band in there, and they had tweeted and put on Facebook that they were in here today, and someone called like, "Oh, I just saw that they're in your studio. Can I get a quote? I'm mixing right now. Like, I want to be there." So, but if I didn't know how to handle it or talk to the client, you know, we could there's a dead lead basically. There it goes.
Right.
You know, if I don't represent the company well. So it's your analog version of yourself versus your digital that you really have to make sure is on point.
And I think people also tend to go overboard with their digital version because there don't seem to be any consequences to their actions. But there actually are consequences to their actions, and I find it kind of funny how the digital self overflows into the analog self, as I'll have IRL conversations with people and they'll bring up things that happen online.
Right.
And people don't think that happens, but it does. You can really either help yourself or trash your reputation permanently with your online presence.
It's horrible. I mean, just think about, like, Twitter is public, so you could do a search of your name and something random, and there could be a tweet that you put up. You just thought it was whatever. You're just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. That's the way the internet works. Unless you're putting out positive posts and pictures and video, unless you're putting out a lot of content that's positive, if you have nothing else, your little jacked up tweets are going to come up when people Google your name. That's what's going to come up. Nothing like productive.
Right.
You know, so if you're going to have an out there persona, hopefully you have some other content to back it up so that when people do Google search you, you know, some things that you want to show up will show up.
Right.
Maybe your jacked up stuff shows up on page 4.
Yeah, but not first. So for people who don't have a specially designed interior decorated studio and they still want to get some clients, what would you tell them that they should do? Like, how should they go about, you know, in either the digital or analog world, getting people to want to hire them as mixers or whatever they do in the industry?
Right. I think that's what I was about to point out, is I think that they have to figure out their role. So what role do they want to play, and what do they want to get paid for? So which role do you want to get paid for? So there's different pathways for everyone depending on what role you're playing. So for engineers, people who are starting off engineering, you will need to do a lot of engineering probably for free, but what you're doing is you're actually getting better, getting experience. You're learning client satisfaction and client services. Hopefully you're teaching yourself as you're going along, because obviously you don't want to be charging nothing forever. So hopefully, so at the same time, you have to make sure that you're doing a great job, because the word of mouth is going to be your payment. So if you did a good job and they told someone about it, you're paid. You also, it's good to create a kind of leverage of, okay, I'll do it free for you this time. Because you don't want them to say they did a great job and they were free.
Exactly.
You don't want to mess up the next, because it could be, 3 months later and you're actually getting really good at this and you got a referral, but they know you didn't charge anything for it, and
right.
So that gets kind of sticky. So you definitely want to show that you're worth something. Otherwise, they're not going to trust you with whatever they're trying to hire you to do, because sometimes free doesn't mean anything. You could be free and being front of house for someone's show and jack up their show.
That's right.
Yeah, because you're free, and then you just messed up their whole show. Like, are you kidding me? And you just did it for free, and then they're like, "Damn, you get what you pay for." But
that's what I was about to say. You get what you pay.
You want to be that person of the you got what you paid for and nothing.
Right. Right. That's called short career.
Yeah. So everything that you do is measured, and it will be followed and it'll be watched. So word of mouth. When you do things for free, you have to keep track of it. So now you have a recording, a live recording, and now you can say to the next person, "See how well I did." You can listen. Put your stuff up on SoundCloud. You can listen to what I've done. I have a page on SoundCloud. Obviously you have to probably ask whoever you're going to post, whoever owns the content, can I put this on my SoundCloud? Make sure it's not downloadable. Make sure you're not, doing anything against what the artist would want. But
sure.
If you can use resources like that when you're an engineer, that's going to be priceless. Because if someone wants a job at Oasis and I'm like, well, and we're a mastering studio, so either bring in some CDs or vinyl that has your credits on it, or do you have a website, or, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, so how can I hear what you've done?
Right. So
if you're playing a role of that you're supposed to have done something in content, if you're supposed to have been a part of the content creation process, if it's true, then you will have access to the content.
Yeah.
And it will show your skill and ability. So there's certain things you can't really lie about. You can
but like you said,
you can fast talker. Yeah, you can like pull the wool over their eyes, but if you don't perform well, and then they're like, "Damn, I didn't even check up on that person."
Mm-hmm.
okay, well that was your fault, but then your name is now like mud.
Right. All over the place.
I think that's kind of that's for engineering. That's kind of a pathway for engineering, where you do some work for free, but then you also hopefully you can get some kind of mentor. So it might not be in it might not be in the dream studio situation where you get to be a runner and then a second engineer and then the engineer. It may be something that you're assisting for a producer that has a home studio, and this producer is teaching you a lot, but maybe you're interning, maybe it's kind of pseudo interning, they don't really pay you much, but you're getting valuable information. Maybe you get to do a project on their gear, I don't know. You know, there's things that you can work out for free labor. You know, because in those kinds of situations, both people have to benefit. You know, the producer or the engineer or whoever you're assisting you have to be good enough for them to even want you around. Otherwise,
Right.
hell, you know, you're in the way. Or, you know, so you have to be beneficial to them, and they have to be beneficial to you. So you have to actually feel like you're learning something, or you're getting experience, but you're also gaining a reference. So even if you didn't make money from that person and you have a mentor, someone that you can call, like, hey, you know, or talk things out or whatever, or you know, you're trying to get a job and they can call this person as your reference. So I think everyone's always trying to get references. You know, people that know their work, people that know them and can vouch for them, because this business is all relationships.
Absolutely. That leads to the question of rate raising. As a freelancer myself, the way I dealt with it was you stack up whatever amount of hours you've decided you're going to make available to clients, and then you get whatever rate you're going to start out with. And then once you fill those up, you replace those people with, or maybe not replace those people, you just inform people that the rates went up. So if people want to pay the higher rates, they can. If not, they're replaced by people that want to pay the higher rates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds like there's some economics going on there.
Yeah.
Some supply and demand situations.
Exactly. And I mean, I think again, as far as music, that would depend on. I think it's tough. Well, I mean, you could tell me, but I think it's tough because it seems like music is sporadically made. Unless you have a connection to some kind of label, not meaning major label, but some kind of aggregator of bands who doesn't put out, let's say, an album by one band every week, but they have 5, 6, 7 bands that they deal with, and so it's kind of a rotation. I think it's tougher to fill up hours as with sporadic clientele. Does that seem to be the way things are?
I think that it's kind of different for every role in music, and so we kind of look at it as compensation. So because you're not always going to get paid with money,
Okay.
and so and that not everyone works on an hourly rate, and so I think I think it's actually up to each person, each organization to figure out their own business model. But there's certain roles that, like engineering, that they're work for hire, and it is sometimes on an hourly basis or sometimes on a flat rate, and that's all you're going to get. There's no back end, like for a producer looking at something, they might take less money for more back end, and that's compensation, and they're looking at it in those situations. Someone who's an artist, they're trying to get paid on all different levels, at all different times, and their rates are probably going to be all over the place, and sometimes it's literally what you can negotiate. So I think that you got to have your ideal rate, and then you have to know okay, I can't do it for that.
Sure.
And I think everything in between is so situational. It's like you have to kind of figure out where you're at, but you know, you got to have a range.
And how would people go about figuring out their value and their leverage point?
Their experience level, their so if they've been in the industry working successfully for 15 years, they can feel like they can charge more than someone that's just been doing it for 2 years. So years in the business, obviously if you've major label credits, you can start off higher. And so yeah, it's the artists that you work with, it's the years that you've been doing it, and does your product stand up against your competitors? How, you know, and you'll hear about it from your clients, whether they come back or not, or you know, artists are kind of competitive, or they want this person because that they did that person, they did that artist, and so yeah, I think the more that you work and the more people you work with, and then obviously the level of exposure that those artists have is where you have your leverage points.
So there are different levels of studios. I guess some would be considered major studios, some would be project studios, or whatever, from large to small to, the laptop mixers or whatever. Do you feel there are differences in the way somebody in each of those situations would or should carry on their business?
That's a good question. I think that clientele and customer service is it's the thing that you have to take most care of, and I think that between any type of studio that you're in, you have to be able to pay attention to that. So that means if you have a situation where you have clientele coming into your space, a lot of times you'll have things like food and beverage and snacks, and it's more of an atmosphere of come on in, get comfortable. But then in those cases you need insurance, and sometimes you need more insurance. So that's that, and then you need certain amenities or whatever available. If you're working from home and you do mostly internet stuff, and you actually don't have any physical interaction with your clients, then you'll have to look at, okay, I probably need better internet speed. I'm probably paying more for internet. I'm probably going to figure out really good video chatting services to talk to my clients. I'm probably going to have Skype. I'm probably going to, or have Vonage, or some way to call internationally cheap. So yeah, you're definitely going to have to figure out how to service your client well, and how to be efficient for your own good.
What are some of the things that could overlap between all of those situations that they need to pay attention to, such as maybe having dependable hard drives?
Your gear, like you're saying, it has to be dependable. Things like hard drives. You don't want to be that producer that their drive failed and you just lost the whole session and mix session. All you have is the 16-bit mix that you sent to the client. You don't even have the 24-bit mix for mastering, but you just lost everything. Don't be that person that has to tell your client. So yeah, so your gear, but then you have to also back yourself up. You have to cover your own ass with communication. And I think that good clients expect communication. If someone's trying to rush you through something and they don't want to talk details, or they don't really want to talk money, or they don't really want to talk about those kind of things, you should be very weary, and you should be wondering if you should be spending your time with those people. So, real clients and real service providers or artists or whatever talk about these things ahead of time.
So would you recommend to people who want to have a career in the entertainment industry that they should be jacks of all trades or that they should specifically specialize?
I think everyone in entertainment should figure out what role they want to play, and you might have to play a couple other roles concurrently, but I think that everyone should figure out what they really love to do, what they want to make money at, and figure out what's the road for that, what's the roadmap for playing that role, and try and stay on that roadmap, but to figure out what other skills that you have too that makes money. So when I was starting out, of course, I wanted to produce bands and get a $5,000 budget for one song to do a band, like to do a song, like, but I got gigs as a Pro Tools operator, or doing vocal production, or things like that, which I liked them and I was good at it, so I did that. But I think that I was always thinking production, always thinking management, big picture, working with people, working in business, being a businesswoman kind of thing was always in the back of my mind. So even though I was playing other roles, kept, the role that I wanted to play in mind, and then you do those things on your kind of free time that you can to advance that part of your career.
Cool. How about collaborations? Good idea, bad idea?
Collaborating with people, I think that songwriters do it all the time. I think that whatever role you're playing, you should naturally figure out who needs you. And if you're a producer, then musicians, kind of, if they know they need you, they need you. Engineers, they need you because you probably have projects, and the producer is the one that hires the engineer for the most part if they are in charge of the budget. If you're an engineer, producers need you, artists need you. Everyone pretty much needs engineers, but it is work for hire. So, in mixing, I don't know how it is nowadays, and they probably are still getting points, but that was another way that mixers were getting compensated when they weren't getting thousands of dollars, or they weren't getting their rate, they would get some points. So
Okay.
that typically would be work for hire, but sometimes you can work in your more compensation if you feel like you're not getting enough up front. So yeah, I think collaborating, I think, it just depends. Songwriters, they're collaborating to make the song, or musicians are collaborating with other musicians to make their songs better and makes you better. Engineers, when they collaborate, it could be a mastering engineer collaborating with the mixing engineer to make sure that it's all gonna sound right, and what the client wants in the end product is gonna be, the best that it can be. So yeah, definitely, I think collaboration is really good for people.
What's the difference between getting clients and keeping clients?
Well, the difference between, everyone has to keep the clients. So, getting clients, some people, their career is based on 2 or 3 clients for 30 years. And those were the best, 3 clients to have. They're making money, or maybe they're high profile, and you're kind of, and you've kept them, and which is the difference. They didn't have to go get someone else. So getting clients to trust you enough to hire you to pay you money, you have to have a track record. Most of the time, a lot of times it's off a referral. So word of mouth is good. It's working for you because it's already spoke for you before you even got there. And if you show up and you're just as wonderful as your referral, said, then you're hired. But you also have to be as wonderful. You have to keep being wonderful to that client.
Yeah.
And keep giving them the product that they're searching for to keep them. And obviously you want to find loyal clients, and you want to be loyal to them. And I think sometimes what that means is some clients, there's always going to be some give and take. I know with producers or engineers, or some from project to project, especially now, everything is different from project to project, whether it's the budget or the people they're working with, or whatever. And sometimes this client might need you to do this project for a little bit less, but that client will turn around and be thankful for your loyalty and turn around and give you a bigger budget project the next time. So I think there's always a give and take, but you have to realize the give and take has to be balanced, because you don't want to get abused. Either way, you don't want to be a client that abuses your service providers, and you don't want to be a service provider that's abusing your client. So it's reciprocal. It is very karmic. It's definitely word of mouth. So that's kind of how you get the clients, kind of how you keep the clients too. I think also, it's hard to refer even. It's word of mouth is a lot of times it's good, kind of when it's happening. Oh yeah, I'm working with so-and-so and they're doing a great job. I love it. Yeah, it's awesome. Because, if 2 years later they find out that a certain client or whoever they gave a referral to is now did something really messed up, or it's hard to say, yeah, and I was the person that
Right.
gave them that name. So it's very, you cannot take referrals lightly, and you really can't just go around asking people, oh, will you, to vouch, for you. If so that gets very. I hesitate to give referrals for certain things, because I don't want it coming back on me.
Right.
So hopefully, when you do get referred, you can live up to the referral and keep your client.
So we talked about the people who are trying to start charging people and the people who are trying to raise their rates. Are there any negotiation tactics that you think are interesting or useful?
Yeah, I think that you have to know what the market is charging, and then you have to charge what the market will bear. So if you figure out what other people are charging at your level, your peers, and you have to start somewhere with the client. So if you're negotiating, you probably say your highest number. And there's a way, you have to read the person you're in front of. So you say that number. If they gawk at that number and they're like, what? I've never paid more than X. And if X is way lower than what you said, and it just depends. If you're just throwing it out there like, okay, let me see if that will work. You also have to believe in whatever number you're saying. But for the most part, it'll land somewhere in the middle if the client is not prepared to pay what you're charging. And if they're not prepared to pay that rate, there's things that you can figure out how to leverage to make that's a reason why it's that rate. They'll get it in 2-day turnaround versus 2-week turnaround, or they can't, for the full rate, they get 1 recall or 2 recalls, or there's ways to justify the high number that you put out there, and that's the talking points that you talk about if they're trying to go lower, and then you have to stick with it though. You have to say, all right, well, for that rate, I can only do 1 recall. So you really, really, really have to listen. You have to listen for a couple days even. You have to give me every change that you desire. I'm only going to pull this up once. That's it. and they give you a a list of things to do, and you do it, and you turn it in, and you say that's it, and you can't let them push you over. So there's things that, but then you have to be reasonable. But you do have to stand your ground if you're putting parameters on it. So that client can come back and think, okay, well, next time I will pay a little bit more because I can get more. Or they'll be satisfied with what you did. They'll be satisfied with your customer service, how you handled it, and then they'll tell their friends, or someone else that has a project, and when they call you, negotiations start all over again. Because you tell that person, it doesn't matter what your friend paid. Your friend's project was different. I'm dealing with your project. What you got? Because there's no way it's identical. Come on. It's not identical. So, yeah, I know they told you that price, but I didn't give them X, Y, Z. Or yours is totally different. You've got 100 more tracks than he had. So you have to figure out, like, what you're dealing with. And before you even say a price, you have to figure out, okay, what am I dealing with? So you have to get them talking on what do they have for you? What are they looking for? What's their expectation? And then you can put a price on it.
How about from the other side? How about being the client when you're in those situations?
When you're in those situations and you're the client, I think that you have to figure out if this person you're negotiating with, are they your first choice? Are they your only choice because this is all you got? Either way, you have to be super nice. I think you have to be nice, especially if you can't pay someone's rate. You have to be prepared. You can't make more work for them if you're trying to give them less. You can't give them more work. So if you can make it easier on them, figure out how to make it easier on them so they don't feel like, damn, this is this cut rate, not trying to pay me, don't even respect me, like, just don't, create good feelings in the negotiations. Create feelings like you're worth it, I know you're worth it, but this is all I got. But don't you know, I'm going to market this. I'm going to put this on these social networks. I'm going to tell them about your plans on how you're going to make it bigger, or how you know what, I've got 3 projects after this one, and I could probably work more into the budget next time. Or I'm going to tell 3 people how much I loved working with you. Throw in some perks if you can't pay all the money. Like I said, compensation is more than just money in entertainment. So, figure out what's in it for them and talk about it quickly.
So do you think that opportunities to work in the entertainment industry are expanding, contracting, or staying the same?
Ways to work in entertainment, meaning collecting money in entertainment. I think that there's always going to be opportunity. I think that it's realistic to think of yourself as being an employee and being an independent. I think that even when you're an employee, most of the time you're also, hopefully you have a side hustle that's not, conflicting with your main gig. If you can have a main gig in entertainment, but it's not as exciting as, what your independent gig is, you got to keep both. You got to keep the lights on. You got to keep eating. You got to stay happy enough to do whatever your passion is. So, yeah, you're probably going to be working more hours in a couple different places, but you're going to be meeting more people, learning more things, and just being out there in entertainment is better than just not. So I think it's perfectly acceptable for people to have a couple different gigs, and they have clients on one place and customers on another, or an employer on another, So I think it just depends on what you define as your level of success. How much does it take for you to live, and figuring how to sustain yourself. But I think that there's always, if you're creative and you're willing to work, there's always opportunity, because you can create your own opportunities.